What if I told you the product that made Apple famous isn't the biggest reason people keep paying Apple? What if Apple's most valuable business isn't something you can hold in your hand? And what if the iPhone, the device that changed the world, has quietly become just the front door to something far bigger? Behind every iPhone sold is a business model so powerful that it earns Apple billions, even after you've stopped buying new phones. Today we're uncovering the real money machine hiding inside Apple. For years, Apple has been known as the iPhone company. Every time Apple launches a new product, millions of people tune in. Long lines form outside stores, social media fills with reviews, and analysts predict sales numbers as if they're covering the biggest sporting event of the year. For a long time, that reputation was completely deserved. When Steve Jobs introduced the first iPhone in 2007, it didn't just launch another smartphone. It changed the entire industry and completely reshaped the way people communicate, work, and interact with technology. The iPhone quickly became Apple's biggest product, generating hundreds of billions of dollars in revenue over the years. Every September, customers waited for Apple's launch event. Tech reviewers rushed to publish their first impressions, and investors watched iPhone sales closely because Apple's success seemed to depend on that single product. Then something unexpected happened. The smartphone market matured. People stopped upgrading every year. New iPhones became faster, more powerful, and packed with new features. But for many people, those improvements weren't enough to justify buying a new phone every year. Instead of replacing their phones every 2 years, many users started keeping them for 4, 5, or even 6 years. For most smartphone companies, that would have been a disaster. Fewer upgrades usually mean fewer sales, and fewer sales usually mean less revenue. On paper, Apple should have started slowing down, but it didn't. The company kept becoming more valuable than ever. Its profits continued growing. Its cash reserves reached astonishing levels. Its stock price climbed to record highs. Which raises a fascinating question. If people weren't buying iPhones as often, where was all that money coming from? To understand Apple's strategy, you have to stop thinking of Apple as a hardware company. Instead, imagine Apple as the owner of a massive digital city. The iPhone isn't the business. It's the front door. The moment someone buys an iPhone, they step into Apple's ecosystem. Their photos are stored in iCloud. They listen to music through Apple Music. They pay with Apple Pay. They wear an Apple Watch. They connect a pair of AirPods. They download apps from the App Store. They watch movies and shows on Apple TV+. Before they even realize it, more and more of their digital life begins to revolve around Apple. Every Apple product is designed to work seamlessly with the others. Your iPhone unlocks your Apple Watch. Your AirPods instantly switch between devices. Your files appear across your iPhone, iPad, and Mac without you doing anything. Everything feels effortless. Now imagine switching to another brand. You have to transfer years of photos, contacts, messages, passwords, and files. You need to learn a completely different operating system. Some accessories may no longer work. Features you've become used to suddenly disappear. It's not impossible, but it's inconvenient enough that many people simply choose to stay. Apple understood something incredibly important. The most valuable customer isn't always the next customer. It's the one you already have. Instead of spending all its energy convincing new people to buy an iPhone, Apple focused on keeping existing customers inside its ecosystem. The longer they stayed, the more valuable they became. Not because they bought a new iPhone every year, but because they continued paying for Apple's services, month after month, year after year. That changed everything. Apple stopped thinking like a company that sells products. It started thinking like a company that builds long-term relationships. Every iPhone sold became the beginning of a journey, not the end of a transaction. And once millions of people entered Apple's ecosystem, the company no longer depended entirely on convincing them to buy another phone. Instead, it found a way to keep earning revenue from the customers it already had, again and again, long after the original purchase. This is where Apple's strategy becomes truly fascinating. Imagine two customers walking into an Apple store. Both of them buy the exact same iPhone for $1,000. At that moment, they're worth exactly the same to Apple. But over the next 5 years, their stories take completely different paths. The first customer buys the phone, uses it every day, and never spends another dollar. The second customer upgrades to iCloud storage, subscribes to Apple Music, downloads paid apps, makes in-app purchases, uses Apple Pay, buys AirPods, and eventually adds an Apple Watch and even a MacBook. That single $1,000 customer has now generated several $1,000s in revenue. Not because Apple sold another iPhone, but because the iPhone opened the door to everything else. And that's exactly how Apple designed its business. One of the smartest parts of this strategy is the App Store. Think of it like a giant shopping mall. Apple doesn't own every store inside the mall, it simply owns the building. Every time someone buys a paid app, starts a subscription through an app, or makes certain in-app purchases, Apple earns a percentage of that transaction. It doesn't matter whether it's a streaming service, a fitness app, a productivity tool, or a mobile game. As long as the transaction happens inside Apple's ecosystem, Apple continues to make money. Then there's Apple's services business. It includes iCloud, Apple Music, Apple TV Plus, Apple Arcade, Apple Care, Apple Pay, advertising, licensing, and several other digital services. Unlike hardware, these services generate recurring revenue. Customers keep paying every month and every year, even if they don't buy another iPhone. And that's incredibly valuable. Manufacturing an iPhone requires factories, raw materials, shipping, warehouses, and a global supply chain. Adding one more iCloud subscriber or Apple Music user costs Apple only a fraction of that. That means higher profit margins and more predictable income. Exactly the kind of business investors love. The iPhone is still essential, but today its role is different. The iPhone brings customers into Apple's world. The ecosystem keeps them there, and Apple's services continue generating revenue long after the original purchase. That's how Apple built a business that keeps growing, even when people hold on to the same phone for years. As Apple's ecosystem continued to grow, something remarkable happened. Investors slowly stopped seeing Apple as just another smartphone company. Instead, they started paying closer attention to Apple's services business, its ecosystem, and the number of active devices around the world. Because every new iPhone sold was no longer just a one-time sale. It represented years of future revenue. One customer could continue generating income for Apple for 5 years, or even longer. At the same time, Apple built one of the most loyal customer bases in the world. Many people didn't just own an iPhone. They owned a MacBook, an iPad, an Apple Watch, and AirPods. Every device worked together so seamlessly that replacing one often led to buying another. The more Apple products someone owned, the more valuable the ecosystem became. Customers weren't staying because they had to. They stayed because everything worked so well together that leaving felt like starting over. That convenience became one of Apple's biggest competitive advantages. Today, the iPhone still generates an enormous amount of revenue. But revenue doesn't tell the whole story. Profit does. Many of Apple's fastest growing and highest margin businesses come from services and its ecosystem, not just from selling another smartphone. And this strategy didn't just change Apple, it changed the entire technology industry. Companies stopped asking, how do we sell more devices? Instead, they started asking, how do we build an ecosystem people never want to leave? Google expanded its services. Microsoft doubled down on subscriptions. Amazon strengthened Prime. The lesson was clear. The product isn't always the business. Sometimes the product is simply the beginning. The real business is the relationship that continues long after the first purchase. That's the strategy Apple mastered better than almost anyone else. The iPhone may have changed the world, but Apple's greatest innovation wasn't the phone itself. It was building an ecosystem that keeps creating value for customers and generating billions of dollars long after the original sale. If you thought this story was surprising, wait until you see what comes next. There's another billion-dollar strategy hiding in plain sight, one that millions of people use every day without realizing how it really works. Once you understand it, you'll never look at some of the world's biggest companies the same way again. So if you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe because the next one might completely change the way you think about modern business.